Hello, world singers. My name is Tyler,
And my name is Brooke.
and this is Cosmere Conversations. We welcome you, friends, to a very special episode. This is the live recording of our Villains of the Cosmere panel at Dragonsteel Nexus 2025. And we had such a blast with everyone who was able to attend. Unfortunately, the first 8 to 10 minutes or so of the recording was not viable. And so this is going to pick up in the middle of our conversation. So I wanted Brooke and I to do a little bit of a soft introduction to the panel so it kind of eases you in as the listener.
We'll give a quick introduction. You'll hear the live panel, and then make sure you listen to the end for some questions that were asked by audience members after the panel. To start with, we have on the panel myself, Tyler, as well as Seth Tye, the.cosmere.academy, Priscilla Spencer, who works in the creative department at Dragonsteel, and Jaden Feddock of the Next Chapter podcast.
Everybody gives us a big round of applause. It's probably one of the loudest rounds of
standing
applause.
ovation,
Yeah, exactly.
actually.
Just
Yeah.
for the introduction.
Thrilled to see us.
Unfortunately, that is not captured on audio, so there's no evidence that we are either telling the truth or lying, but you can just believe us because we're trustworthy people on the internet. Our panel begins with an opening of how do we define a villain? Because there's so many characters in the Cosmere that are circumstantial, that are temporary, that have a redemption arc.
Yeah, as we started to talk about this panel and kind of brainstorm for what we wanted to talk about, this question of, yeah, but is this person actually a villain, kept coming up. And so we thought it was really helpful to have a couple of different vocabulary words in our arsenal to help us kind of discuss the different roles that these characters play, how they sometimes change between different roles, and the differences in how people can see these characters. Starting with the definition of a villain, which is dictionary defined as a character whose evil actions or motives are important to the plot.
Then we had the concept of the antagonist, a person who actively opposes or is hostile to someone or something.
And finally, we have the adversary, who is one's opponent in a contest, conflict, or dispute.
Now, what is so interesting about these elements, and just, an example of why we all love the Cosmere, is that a character can move between these different classifications as their story progresses. For example, it's probably possible to say that Kaladin and Adolin, at a time in their relationship, actually have some adversarial roles going on.
Yeah, or antagonistic. They're antagonistic towards each other. I think my example that I gave during the panel was that I think Taravangian starts as an adversary to Dalinar in a lot of ways. They are opposed to each other. And then eventually, in my opinion, Taravangian graduates to truly become a villain and a character who is evil.
Yes, because he's motivated by Wind and Truth for evil purposes or taking evil actions. And this is kind of what we use as the springboard for the rest of our conversation, which you are going to be able to hear in just a moment. We do introduce a couple of things. One, you will hear us referencing questions from the audience because we collected those ahead of time, or while we were talking, people were able to submit. And so sometimes you'll hear us referring to that. And then two, we had a fun game going on where the audience could rank a character from the Cosmere on a scale of how evil they are versus how hot they are.
We love a hot villain.
Yeah, well, specifically, Brandon Sanderson loves a hot villain because
Yeah.
he introduces a lot of hot villains. And so we'll talk about that by the time that the panel is over as well. And then, as Brooke mentioned, at the very end of the live recording, we took some questions from the audience. Actually, in this panel, answered more questions of people who didn't want to be recorded. They just like came up. There was maybe 5 or 6 people that just came up and asked not to be recorded. So either way, we do have some recorded questions and then took a longer period of time able to answer those at the end of this episode.
With all of that said, here is our panel, Villains of the Cosmere.
You could look at like somebody like Ruin and ask the question, how much choice did he have?
Right, or is he like just
actually
being
count as a
Ruin?
villain, or is he just literally a vessel for a force of ruin? So yeah, I don't think I would consider Ruin to be specifically a villain. Retribution, I absolutely would, because of like Tyler said, we see his journey as a mortal when we know that even when he was a regular guy before he had these powers, it was all there. It was all there beforehand. The powers may be using that in a way, but it was all already there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there's also like Brandon's comment in the spoiler Q&A last night about like harmony versus discord, and how so much of that is rooted in like how like the people that revere the shard view him. And like there are different ways that like different shards can combine to create different outcomes. Like who knows, like held in a different vessel's hands, like maybe passion and honor could be like a recipe for a really happy marriage.
Maybe.
What is interesting to me about Taravangian specifically is the journey that he's gone on from a mortal who visited the Night Watcher, but the Night Watcher was cultivation in that instance. Cultivation set him up with what I have called, or just like thought in my own brain, as a bicameral mind. That's like his boon and his curse, right? He has a extreme intelligence that is paired with an extreme empathy, and they have an inverse relationship. For the way that he is processing the world around him, I feel like that gives him 2 paths on his worst day or on his days when he is more empathetic. He defines it as worse. But on the days that he is more empathetic, he's seen the world, processing the world very differently than when he is extremely intelligent. And that creates a split in his own mind that is magnified when he becomes a shard. And he talks about this a little bit in the odium interludes of Wind and Truth, and how he's like able to experience now the entire cosmere weight of suffering and pain, and he is angry at cultivation because of this. But what is so interesting about even 1 shard, let alone 2, is that there's also the intent and the will and the purpose of the shard power itself. So he's not really just dealing with the 2 split minds of Taravangian. Now he's also dealing with, what does Odium want? What is the intent of Odium? And now, as Retribution, he also is going to have to juggle, what does Honor want? The power of Honor. What do you guys think about that? The kind of like splitting of Taravangian, and he's like trying to balance all of these different things.
I mean, I think that is the hard thing about being a vessel of 2 shards. Like, that's exactly what we see with
Harmony.
Yeah, with Harmony. It's very difficult to balance those multiple intents. It doesn't seem like it's going great for Harmony, so we'll see how it goes for Retribution.
I have a question for y'all and for the audience. Do we think that Taravangian's split mind has carried with him into godhood? Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody say no? Because I'm on the no side.
Okay. There's a good number of us here, including on the panel. What do you tell me about why you think no? There's no carrying through that split mind.
So I think it was a power imposed on him by a shard, and when he became a shard, he was able to transcend that curse. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's also just not in the text, and I'm like a textual evidence girly, so
Yeah.
if it's not there,
It does say
then...
a god divided.
Yes.
Right?
That's the chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's literally the chapter title.
So,
But
like,
then I
what is
think
the division?
There is some evidence for it still being there, so I understand but like when we see him thinking, he's very aware of both sides
Yes.
simultaneously.
Yes.
Yeah. And
And
that's,
he's kind of choosing to go between them rather than being
Yeah.
at the mercy of the boon and the curse.
Yeah.
I think also this like divided God goes back to what Tyler was saying about this like division between the intention of the vessel and then the intention of the shard, and that being the division.
That's an excellent point, and I agree. I would say my own thought process is that he's not at the mercy of the boon and the curse. He is simply, because he experienced that way and he processed for so long and had a bicameral mind coming in, he still is thinking that way as a shard. But I do think the question of a divided God, is that about the existing boon and curse, or maybe not existing, or the intent, is something we will only learn with more books and maybe Fires of December. Maybe some aspect that we will learn in the future is like how that actually plays out for these vessels.
And intent is a huge theme in probably 15 questions that I've gotten in so far. So
I think I want to just real quick clarify. In my mind, when I think of the villain in this character, I think of Teravangian.
Yeah.
Not Odium nor Retribution.
Very interesting. So it is more related to that vessel than the shard itself. I think we do, for the sake of time, we have a lot of these.
Yeah, we should move
So
on.
We're going to continue on, but I think this is continue your theories coming through. We'll try and talk through some of those at the end, and we will have a bit of Q&A. So continuing on from there, the Lord Ruler. How do we feel about the Lord Ruler? As divided? I think probably, at least from these that I'm seeing so far, we have quite a few that do not feel like he is an evil ruler.
Yeah, this has been a hot topic lately, I feel like.
A very hot topic, if you ask me.
If you see the Brotherwise art.
Yeah.
Oh, Daddy.
Is it hot in here, or is it just literally really, really hot in here?
Or are we just looking at the Lord Ruler? I think that I'm going to start us off and just get us full
Yeah, you have a
controversy
strong opinion.
right at the beginning. The Lord Ruler is one of the most villainous people in the entire cosmere. I despise the Lord Ruler. I think everyone... Okay, wait, we do have artwork. You look at that artwork, and you're seeing hotness, and you're like, he can't possibly be that evil. Look how hot he is.
Have you guys seen
distraction.
Emily from Ghost Buddies cosplay?
Yes.
It's so
this morning.
good.
Yes.
She's cosplaying as that Lord Ruler, and it's good.
And yet still evil.
And yet still evil. I think I agree with you. I do think he is one of the most villainous characters in the Cosmere.
So Priscilla and Brooke, are you on the other side of this? Do you think he's a little bit more nuanced or full villain?
I do think he is more nuanced. I feel like we have to give him some credit for like not really knowing what he was doing, like doing some bad stuff on accident, like moving the planet. Like he was trying to do a good thing. He was trying to like fix the world and protect people. Yes, he was. And like, don't get me wrong, I don't think he's not bad. Like he also makes bad decisions. I don't think he's like a hero, but I don't think he's as bad as some people portray him to be.
So
and for the record, I don't think he's hot, so I'm not biased.
that's a great
nuanced
point.
full villain. Yeah, I like that.
Let's get a quick, just general reaction. If you think the Lord Ruler is a villain, give me 2 claps. If you think the Lord Ruler is more of a nuanced character or fluctuates between adversary, antagonist, give me 2 claps now. Relatively even split.
You can be a villain and be nuanced.
Of course.
Yeah, what's your take?
I think that just because he did a couple good things, yes, he put the planet in a place that wasn't as bad as it was before, and like some of the powers that he used with the Well of Ascension, but also like he genetically differentiated the humanity into like sort of two separate phenotypes, like basically to create an oppressed servant class, and like made all his BBFs like weird slime monsters. Like, where does that get fun? He basically he was the sole like authoritarian monarch, and he presided over like what is one of the most like disgusting societal structures that like we needed these heroes to rise up and counter. Like, how is that not villainous? Yes, he's nuanced, but also he sucks.
Yeah. Go back even further. You've got, when we learn at the Well of Ascension, his story doesn't start well. I mean, even all the way back as far as we can go, let alone when we first are introduced to the Lord Ruler, we don't much like him because of the writing, because of what he's doing. Right. But then you learn more about his backstory, and you're like, oh yeah, definitely don't like that guy.
Yeah, even as Rashek, he is complicated and could be villainous at times. I think that, Priscilla, everything that you said is why I would label him as, this is like specific, the Lord Ruler. The Lord Ruler is the entity that created all of this horrific circumstances, literally genetically dividing people so that one could be a subservient group, and he's doing it for one reason, and it is not, oh, because I'm trying to be utilitarian, it's because he wants to be in power, and he wants to maintain that power.
I disagree.
He wants to maintain that. He's like, I'm the hero, I can fix it next time. And so I need to create a horrific society to keep me in power so that next time I can then address all of the problems I kind of created.
I mean, he is protecting the planet the whole time. Like, that's what I find the moment very compelling when, they kill him and then they're like...
Preservation even says so, right?
Yeah. And then they're like, oh no. I think he says, what are you doing?
Oh, nothing. Just playing to the audience.
Mussolini made the trains run on time. That doesn't make him good.
I was going to say, before we move on from Lord Ruler, we're saying that if you do potentially evil actions for the best for your planet's system, that makes you an okay person, because we'll see that again.
Let's go to the next one. I think it introduces complexity when you have different ideas.
Boy.
And this one is going right over to Seth. Take it away.
Listen, he is a villain. I'm not going to deny that. He is absolutely a villain. I think he is the most nuanced villain in the Cosmere. I think there's arguments to say that he did not fail Kaladin. Kaladin failed him. Thank you. And I think that he is a willing victim of his circumstances, but he's a victim of his circumstances nonetheless. I think there are actions he could have taken to avoid his outcome, and I think he still can take some, not all, of those actions. I don't think he'll ever be an ally or a hero again, but I am pro-redemption. Oh. Not a lot of cheers on that one. And he's hot. The ice spikes might not do it for me, though. I think that might be a deal breaker.
That was my question.
It worked in Marsh, it works on Marsh, but Fire, I don't know.
Do you think that he still has that capacity to change even after becoming the Crystal Inquisitor?
I like that term.
Thank you.
Oh, we should call him that. I like that.
I mean, I call him that.
I don't think that he has in him anymore to be a good guy. I don't think he's ever going to be cuddly teddy bear. I don't think he's going to be running around being a hero. But I do think he has in him to maybe be like a Ronin, a bad guy doing bad things to bad people.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting.
Because we do see in Words of Radiance, or Oathbringer, shoot, I'm so sorry. But we see him, he literally stands up against the singers. When he's on the singers' side and he's like their slave, he literally stands up to them and gets physical and says, hey, you can't treat your people like this.
Yeah, he's you need to be better than us.
You need to be better than we were. So we still see there is morality within him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of good instincts in Moash. And to your point of being kind of a victim of his circumstances, I think we continue to see that happen throughout his story. Even when he's about to get spiked, he kind of wakes up and he has a moment of really intense grief for his actions and for what's happened to Teft. And I think that's a moment when he could possibly like turn a corner, and he shows some desire to want to. And unfortunately, it comes down to the people you surround yourself with. And he's been surrounded in this instance with Odium, who just sort of continues to push him away from that path of redemption.
I think he's unfortunately very susceptible to manipulation.
Yeah.
And he has been heavily manipulated.
I think what is so interesting about Moash's story, and maybe the story of some of the other villains, in quotes, that we will get to today, is that there is a large aspect of the society around them that makes them the person that they are. Moash obviously is victimized by his society, victimized by the Light Eyes, and yet still stands up when the roles are kind of reversed, and like wants to do the right thing, say like, you need to be better than the way that I was treated. That's a noble action. That's an honorable action. And then it is so interesting as these characters make more decisions, in part influenced by their surroundings and their society, how many of those decisions can they make in the villainous category when it moves them from just being an adversary to Kaladin. Maybe if he had made slightly different decisions on his path, he would have remained just in that adversary category. And it would be far easier to imagine a redemption arc, because it's just like, okay, well, him and Kaladin fought a little bit, and they had some disagreements, but I can see how we're going to bring him back into the fold. But if you continually make evil actions, or you continually take villainous actions, at some point, does that become irredeemable? And I know several people asked this question as like, can Moash be redeemed after this point? If hypothetically he becomes a general or lieutenant of retribution, how many evil actions can he continue to do and still be rolled back? And that's what is so interesting. It's the perspective that we have on these characters, because of course, if I went over and asked someone from Yakaved or any of the regions that Dalinar as the Blackthorn was invading during that period of his life, he's a villain, 100%. Like, if your army comes in, kills my family, brutalizes my people, that thing is the villain, and he's such a villain that it, in the spiritual realm, created the Blackthorn. But that is very difficult to walk back or imagine being walked back. And yet, of course, we saw him at a different time in his life, when he was already on the Way of Kings, when he was already taking that next step, and he was just a man in the process of changing. And so that is probably a bigger question philosophically than we're ready to answer on this panel. But I do think that's what everybody is interested in, right? It's just how far can this go before we can see them in a new light?
I want to tie into that when you're saying redemption events come to only so many characters, right? They don't always get opportunities for redemption. Some characters are just given, as far as the narrative is concerned, over and over just making bad choices. Moash has received a few redemption possibilities. I feel like he hasn't necessarily taken advantage of those, but I do have a question kind of for the panel in general, based on one that came through here. Do you feel like Moash is a good candidate for what in other areas, other books and series would be considered a deathbed reconciliation or a deathbed redemption?
I would hate that
Absolutely
so
not.
much.
Absolutely
No Darth Vadering for Moash, please.
No, yeah.
That is common in other places where they're they're just on the edge, and then they seemingly do
Dying is
last
easy.
final good
Living
act.
is harder.
Fair enough. Well, I think, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have a personal stake in whether, in ultimately Moash is redeemed or not. I just want it to be interesting. I want it to engage in a very, complex and nuanced manner, what redemption even means. Is it in the heart of the person who is trying to change their behavior? Is it in the eyes of the people who were harmed? And, whether or not they choose to forgive? There are so many different sort of, nuances to how we view redemption. And, yeah, I want, basically, like, the thesis of Dalinar's character is how far down the dark path can a character go and still be redeemed? And I want that for Moash. Like, I want there to be something really juicy and crunchy and interesting, and yeah, like, I want it to challenge readers' perceptions.
And I think before we move on, I think one of my favorite parts of Moash, even though it kind of gives away how I feel about him, he's probably one of the most interestingly capable villains. Because it just makes such an interesting back and forth, right, between not just his character arc, but fighting against the good or the protagonist. He just does a really good job of it. And I feel like that makes for a more interesting story instead of the villain who has everything but just makes a bunch of mistakes and ends up losing. It kind of feels like he's quite capable as a villain, so I like that.
Yeah, and I think that's where he sort of falls into the antagonist category as well, because he also brings this kind of philosophical friction to Kaladin that helps Kaladin define who he is and who he wants to be, sort of in opposition to Moash's actions and philosophy.
And I think we have a good question that kind of transitions us a little bit. So,
quickly, I just want to add one
go ahead.
interjection. I do find it really interesting that, like, as readers and consumers of media, we tend to put a lot more weight on villainous characters that do harm to characters that we like, as opposed to characters that we've never met. And, like, this was very clear to me, like, after the first of the Star Wars sequels came out with Kylo Ren. Like, most of us didn't really care that, like, he was complicit in blowing up entire planets, but when he killed Han Solo, that made us mad. So, yeah, continue.
No, I think, and a lot of these questions really tie into this, and I really appreciate, as they're coming in, keep thinking of them and keep sending them in. One of them has to do with, do you feel like there's more benefit to what might be considered a smaller scale or a side villain? And I think we'll go into that a little bit as we transition here. Villains that are a part of a contained story, not necessarily an overall arc, but still have incredible impact on that story. So let's talk about Sadeas and Amaram.
I want to get an audience vibe. Both of these guys, at least I would categorize similarly. So what do we think? Do we think villain? Yeah. Do we think antagonist? Yeah. Do we think adversary? All right, so mostly villain.
Interesting.
I'll go to bat with this one, and just to start us off, keep it kind of tight, because these two are a little bit two sides of the same coin. Obviously, they represent the military leaders in their respective regions, and they are dealing only really at the mortal level. These characters never touch the shard powers or the radiant. I mean, Amaram wants to, but really they're kind of villainous because of their circumstances and their societies. Like, the Alethi culture is very brutal. It is incredibly difficult to imagine for any of us, sitting in a semi-air-conditioned room, that you are going to be living on a war campaign for 20, 30, maybe in Sadeas' case, close to 40 or 50 years of your life in some way, just like fighting all the time. That's difficult for anybody in the modern world to really. What does that do to your mind? Just over time, if you start at 15 and you're trained, kill people so that you go to near heaven in the tranquiline halls and, like, have honor, and you do that for 40 years and you're telling other people to do that, how do you have to justify all of those actions, be they evil or villainous or whatever? I think that clearly Sadeas is a difficult example because I hate him. And I agree with Adolin. Like, sometimes you just need to stab someone in the face. There's no cops here, right? It's fine. He's fictional. I don't like him. I'm glad that he's dead.
But it's not okay when Moash stabs Elokar in the face after.
I just think they each represent something slightly different than these other characters, because their actions are almost entirely based on a society that, for the most part, supports their actions. I think that's something that's said during the Tower Way of Kings scene, is basically that what Sadeas did is not going to cause society to break down or a huge rebellion. It's just viewed as he had the power, he had the ability, he wanted to do it, he executed his move appropriately. Good job, Sadeas. I don't like it. But what do you guys think?
Do you think he's not a villain?
No, I think he's a villain.
Okay.
And I hate him.
Okay. I think that there is like a difference between these two characters. I think that Sadeas, we do have evidence that he is at least in a lot of circumstances like trying to do what he thinks is for the greater good, whether that's like for Dalinar's benefit or for their societal benefit, or like he has his own opinions about how it's best to protect Gavilar, etc. And so while I may like disagree with his opinions, I think I always like a villain that just comes out and is like, this is me, evil and all.
Yeah.
Amaram to me is more insidious because he pretends
Which
to
is
be
exactly
honorable.
what Kaladin thinks.
Yeah,
That is
exactly.
the entire reason Kaladin hates him.
Yeah. It's like don't hide. Don't pretend like you're doing this for some grand reason when again for Amaram, it's really mostly just about ego and the fact that he wants to be the big man on campus. He wants to have power. He wants to like look a certain way and have certain accolades in their society, and instead of actually like working to get them, he manipulates other people and hurts other people to try to get ahead. And to me, that's worse. I hate Amaram more than I hate Sadeas. Hot take. Thank you.
I would add that probably by the standards of Alethi society, I don't know if Sadeas is evil. I think he is the model of Alethi masculinity. Like, we all see him as extremely evil. Like, the Colin family sees him as extremely evil. But, he has, basically he is living... So not only are both Sadeas and Amaram, they were mentored by the Blackthorn, which I think says a lot about the kind of people that they grew up into, and they did not have the benefit of cultivation to reform their hearts through magic. Again, as I'm talking about these nuances, please do not interpret these as defending these terrible people in any way, shape, or form. I like the nuance.
It's more a critique of like the societal structure.
Exactly. Yes, and societal.
The
societal
that
structure
brings
is
these people to
awful.
Yeah.
But he has the most efficient method of obtaining gem hearts. Yeah, it results in a lot of people dying, but does Alethi culture really put value on human life? When he backstabs, he follows the very arbitrary rules of when it's okay for Alethis to backstab each other. He is conforming to the laws that society has put down, but he's doing it to the people that we like.
It's interesting to see them as a societal focal point of all the issues that happen. It's interesting to see the difference between a fantasy version of this and what you might read in a history book, because you get so much more context and thought process and understanding of the other side in many cases, the antagonist, and it can lead you to say the circumstance were such that he was just a product of that society, or the circumstances in his mind, or he thought he was doing the right thing, whereas we don't always get that same benefit of omniscience in the real world. So I think it's really cool. It's an opportunity to think on that other side of the coin, even if we don't like these people very much. So
I think this next one actually represents maybe this even a little bit better. And Priscilla, I'm excited to hear you talk about it, because it is a character that I think a lot of us genuinely like and maybe find very interesting.
Mommy.
Did you say mommy?
I did.
Yeah, we had to have the ups and the downs. And so, Priscilla, tell us a little bit about Rabania.
You mean Banff Stem MILFs, the book? So Raboniel is by far easily my favorite villain in the Cosmere. I think that she's the best villain Brandon has ever written. She is a scientist in the most dangerous sense of the word. She is curious and systemic and unflinching. Yes. She is an immortal, and I think that she's one of the most intriguing, one of the most credibly immortal characters that I've seen written. She kind of reminds me of how the Fae are written occasionally.
Ooh, yeah.
In that she is she's capable of tremendous empathy, but also she doesn't let that empathy stop her from what she feels needs to be accomplished. She's also she's seen generations upon generations of people die, both humans and singers, and I think that has in many ways reduced the in her mind the measure of the weight of a life, and also the fact that every time that a fused returns, the cost is a singer her life. And I think that does something to a person's brain. She is introduced...
To know that every breath you take is at the direct expense of someone else.
Yes, and
the
the
longer you
entire
go,
legacy of however many people that had to die.
That has to have an effect.
She is introduced as someone who has committed genocide in the last desolation, like basically the last time she was awake before this. She intentionally released a bioweapon that she believed would wipe out all human life on Roshar and also a large number of singers. And it was only out of luck that it only killed 10% of all humanity and 1% of all singers. Yikes. When you think about some of the bloodiest conflicts in world history, in American history, the Civil War, it was only 2.5% of the population compared to 10% and 1%. Holy moly, the death toll is insane to contemplate.
And yet we still love her as a character.
Absolutely,
as
yes.
an audience, I want to get to who loves Raboniel as a character. Everybody loves Raboniel. And you guys don't think that over the millennia that she's been one of Odium's highest commanders, that she hasn't done atrocity after atrocity after atrocity. And yet we love her.
She's
But
so
screw
charismatic.
Moash.
And also, she was one of the 9, so she lived entombed in stone, and what does that do to a person's brain?
I think that's what is so interesting about this direct contrast between someone like Sadeas or Amaram, who generally people don't like as much, and Raboniel, who people generally do like. Raboniel's more evil. She's done way more evil. She's been alive longer. She's killed more people. She's been responsible for more deaths. And I think that we are still attracted to something about the compelling or complex nature. And the more you can explain, the more you can understand, the more you can sympathize with a person, the more justifiable their actions become, which is, to me, again, maybe too philosophical for this conversation, but it is very interesting to me that we're so in flux. We're so influenced by the other people. We're not strict Kantians. We're not someone who's just the rule is X, you perform the action, I hate you forever now. It's all versions of gray. It's just
It's so nuanced, it always is.
yeah, and it's that way. I think that I agree, Priscilla, with you that this is one of Brandon's best characters and it's paired with another very interesting and maybe competing for best character in my mind in Navani, because from her backstory, we want to give a round of applause to Navani. Not a villain, totally hot, doesn't belong on this list at all, but she's very interesting. She has an interesting backstory, and Raboniel is kind of her mirror image, is such a compelling bit of writing. And I know Rhythm of War is sometimes a decisive one of the Stormlight Archive, where it's kind of people love it or people hate it. But I think one of the reasons why the people who love it really love it is this complex nature of both of these women.
I mean, I think one of the things that's so interesting about Raboniel and what makes her such a great character and a great villain to love to hate or hate to love is that while she has done all of these truly horrific things, at least according to her, it is for this goal of ultimately ending this conflict. And then the question innate to that is how far do you go? How many lives are you willing to sacrifice so that no one else has to die?
Exactly.
How many lives are worth peace?
Right, yeah, exactly. And I don't know the answer to that.
I think if we just ask the question straight up with no context, is peace a worthwhile goal?
Right, if you're gonna
everybody
say-
in this room would answer emphatically yes. And then you ask at what cost, and then we get a little wish.
Yeah, because it's essentially a trolley problem, right? Do you want to kill 10,000 people now so that in the future 100,000 people can live?
Mm-hmm. There's a time horizon question more than anything else. Peace now, sure. We could just hold off. A stalemate. Does that solve the problem? Likely not. Or you could be a Teravangian. Peace on a 1,000 year horizon. justifies a lot in his
Yeah, especially when you're talking about these immortal characters who have this really zoomed out perspective of being able to, one, wait long enough to see the piece, to see the benefit. Like, that's a very different perspective than a mortal who is interested in what's happening right now to the people that we know.
Yeah, much in the way that, like, Yasna is the person that Serene thinks she is. I think that Ramoniel's the person that Taravangian, deludes himself into being.
I love that.
Because, yeah, like, she has this, like, very coherent, compelling, moral philosophy. Believing that the only path to lasting peace is to end the war decisively. And also, and that's not even, like, touching, the issues with her daughter. And wanting to free her daughter from this eternal resurrection after resurrection after resurrection of just
It's
not being her anymore.
Yeah.
Yes, and recognizing that this is the fate that is going to ultimately befall all of them.
Yep.
I recognize that we're just becoming an episode of The Good Place, but these are really fun questions to think about, and I think it is what drives so much interest in the Cosmere as a whole, is because we do need to see things on those different levels. We have to ask the question of, is Ellikar's negligent behavior regarding Moash's parents or grandparents, I forgot. Grandparents. That's a small scale compared to what are shards dealing with and the timeline of shards.
So Sadeas isn't any bigger scale than Ellikar's negligence,
Yeah. Exactly, yeah.
Sadeas' betrayal of Dalinar is arguably exactly the same scale as Ellikar killing Moash's grandparents.
And we get to see...
Oh, I'm getting some booze on that one.
Yeah.
Oh.
You've touched the nerve. I like it. I think that being able to move between those scales is a fascinating way for us as readers to kind of explore different concepts. Maybe you feel very passionately about the Kaladin and Moash relationship and their struggle, and then when it gets elevated to a honor versus odium or a shard level, or even from last night, the spoiler Q&A, anybody clap if you didn't want it, or you don't want anybody spoiling anything from yesterday. I barely hear you. So
You don't count.
You have 5 seconds.
you're a great person.
Trolley problem says that person.
Exactly. That's exactly how I feel. So Brandon was asked a question. He rathoed it. I'm not spoiling anything. It was rathoed. But the concept of, did Adenalcium willingly give up his power to be shattered? And that was rathoed. So it's not a yes or a no or anything. But that's a huge question that's now just lingering for all of us going forward, that might change how we feel about the behaviors of the shards. I would maybe originally argue that the shards are all bad because they killed God and then didn't really have a plan what to do. But if Adenalcium saw it as a willing sacrifice, that might change my interpretation.
Doesn't that make sense? Does he willingly broke them all up?
Sure, maybe.
I think that's
I think there's a topic for discussion there, yeah.
Yeah, it adds the complexity.
There's still that big if hanging in the air. So we'll find
I
out.
love that if. It's just out there.
So I want to make sure to give one final opportunity. If you haven't yet submitted, you have 5 seconds to scan this code because we're moving on. We will go through the results of this very, very soon, which I'm pumped to show everybody. So if you haven't scanned it,
So
I've
it's
talked
pretty
for
much-
more than 5 seconds, so it's going
Is
well.
everyone here familiar with the crazy hot scale? Yeah.
You are
That's
now.
essentially what we're doing here.
Okay, so I want to take some time before we go through the results of that, while the rest of you are still answering. I want to go one by one and talk about an interesting speculation or
I do
theory you
have one
might
more thing I
have.
want to say about Ravoniel, and just getting to part of the heart of why so many of us find her so compelling, and that is much as Navani seduces Dalinar through openness and honesty, and Shai manipulates Gautona through was it sincerity? I did not write that word in my notes. Ravoniel disarms Navani through candor. And there's this very interesting, not by threats, but by respect. By seeing her, by recognizing her brilliance.
You guys are awesome.
And by treating her as the intellectual equal that she is. And it's just so fascinating, the contrast between the way that the ways in which she was manipulated by Gavilar in this very, very blunt, forced way, versus the sort of much more subtle, you kind of don't You don't see the betrayal coming, like when when Raboniel reveals that she's been sort of using the sibling to spy and is using this information to further her goals that are antithetical to Navani's goals, and it is just like this bewitching sort of a contrast that we don't normally see in fiction, of just like that incredible empathy and that incredible source of support. The interaction with Raboniel was so healing to Navani. I feel like she was able to heal so much of the trauma of the abuse from Gavilar, and then also just even Dalinar doesn't give Navani the affirmation that Raboniel does. So I find that conflict between that incredible source of healing, but that also the potential for destructiveness, coexisting in the same brain in a way that doesn't feel like it is false or artificial. I find that just so juicy. I love it.
There are definitely people that agree with you in this room.
Especially y'all.
Well, let's weave that into your theory then. Do you have a speculation or a theory related to these villains?
I speculate that Raboniel will be in the Herald flashbacks, and if she's not, I will cry sad tears.
Ooh, that'd be cool.
I like that.
That's great. I like that.
Cool questions?
Yeah, Jaden, do you want to bring up the scale, and then I'll just throw it over to one of the questions from the audience for the rest of the panelists. Brooke, you can start us off. If another person who is more good had become the shard for odium and honor, would their combination still have been retribution?
Ooh, this is such a good question. And I'm thinking about this, in particular now with the spoiler Q&A from the other day and what Brandon said about the shard of harmony / discord, and how perhaps the intention or the ability of Sazed to embrace the intent of discord might actually help him manage it better, and might result in a more balanced shard that might ultimately be better for the planet. And I think that is very similar to what we would see in this circumstance, that there is a version of bringing these two shards together that could potentially be shepherded in a more beneficial, less destructive way.
I've actually thought just the different ways that it could have been interpreted, because that odium and honor being combined was my pet theory for a long time, and so I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I actually thought it was going to be vengeance, is how I thought it was going to be interpreted. Another way I thought it might be was conquest, which would have been worse, which I think is actually pretty on brand with how he's thinking.
Taravangian would have loved a conquest shard.
But I think on the topic of discord versus harmony, I think discord will be good for Scadrial. It will be bad for the Cosmere.
And we see that a little bit on this display with the future Cosmere books that we've got, the Secret Projects mainly, is that there is a conquest nature to the Scadrians now, and they are, from what we have seen, not entirely evil, but they're definitely not good. They're just not a fully known force in the future of the Cosmere. Jaden, do you feel like you have a handle on what this actually tells us, or do you want me to take a second?
I think very interesting to see where this line exists. So there's kind of a linear element to this, but you guys have very varying opinions on just about every single question we've asked you. I think there's a dot on almost every intersection on this chart, which I can appreciate, but there are some that clearly have a much higher average evil rating. I think Sadeas is one of our highest, along with Strathventure. I think these are very interesting to note, that they aren't as major of a character. So maybe that's telling us the more story we get for any character could potentially reduce the net evil that the audience believes that they are.
That's actually really interesting. Like, the more we know someone, the less willing we are to call them evil.
Except for the syndicate.
Some flat lines on here.
Yeah, there's definitely like a slope that was more intense would show a dichotomy in the way that you were judging things. And for the most part, the lines are relatively flat, and there's just a little upslope or downslope, which means that you do see these characters as at least somewhat complicated, and I think that's a good thing, especially from Brandon's perspective as a writer. And I'm trying to find if there's one that is crazy, if there's any version that we think is just truly one-sided. I thought it was going to be Taravangian, but no. Even Taravangian, some of you find mildly attractive.
I'm wondering if, while we're answering some of the Q&A questions, do we have the ability to crunch some of the data so we can find out, what the average of each character's evil and the average of each character's hot?
Yeah, so what we have the data now, and I think this will give us a bit of time for something that we can all share on our different social medias, because once you have the data, it is, we can manipulate it a lot. This was just the immediate version that we could make sure that was active for this panel. But I would
keep
find
an eye out on social media for that.
Yeah, exactly. Follow us, and I think that we still have plenty of interesting. But is there anything that you guys are seeing immediately that you kind of find surprising in any way about these results?
I'm surprised that there's not any that are more extreme, honestly.
Okay, you guys both think they are hot and evil.
We're so empathetic. Good job, everyone.
Straff is hotter than Sadius. Sadius isn't hot, but Straff, really?
Yeah. Which of you is calling Straff hot?
It's quite a few people. So.
Yeah, Straff's attractive, right? No? People.
He has to force women.
Yeah, I understand he's evil, but also I felt like he was described as attractive, whereas Sadius I always felt
he did give birth to Ellen.
Yeah.
Who's attractive?
Those genes had to come from somewhere.
Ellen and Zane both carry his genetics.
Yeah. So.
Mistborn now has Mpreg.
I think that from my perspective of reading, I did think that Sadius was always kind of described as, not attractive. He was like bulbous and maybe had a lifetime of drinking a little bit too much. And so I thought that he was a evil and kind of not hot character. But no, you guys also rank him basically the same. He isn't... No, I'm going to be fair. I'm looking at Sadius now in detail. This scatter plot is a little shifted to the left, so... he's ugly. Thank you all for agreeing.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah.
Well played.
Yeah, let's get some questions just to wrap
We
up.
have quite a few questions. I'm actually we don't have mics in the aisle on purpose. I'm gonna come around with this mic and we will take your questions where you are. So raise your hand if you have a question. I'm gonna run down there in a second.
Yeah, and while he's doing that, I'll start us off with one that I think is great because many people were asking about Harathan. And
I love her.
What do we think about Harathan as a quote-unquote villain? And just take it away, panelists, and then Jaden will come around to the audience.
I'm just going to say I do not think he's a villain. I do not think that Harathan counts
I agree.
as a villain. I think he is at best an adversary.
Yeah.
At best.
Yeah.
Well, maybe at worst. How are we ranking that?
I totally agree. I think that to our conversation earlier about Moash being manipulated by the people around him, Harathan is definitely manipulated by his society and the religious structure he's inside of, but he turns the corner in seeing the flaws in that, so he kind of goes the opposite direction that we see Moash go.
Okay, our first theory / question.
So we're talking a lot about individual characters like Moash and Taravangian, but what about forces like the Sleepless? And I guess I'm curious how you guys view the villainy of different factions.
Yeah,
versus
that's
individuals.
interesting. I don't know if you could classify a group as a villain. That's not true. Yes, you can. I mean, Nazis are villains, right?
Yes.
But
Hot take, I know, people.
you heard it at Dragonsteel. Whoa.
Hot take.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. I'm not sure. I don't have a solid answer, actually.
Yeah, I think it is hard to say because groups are made up of individuals, and so it's hard to like generalize in that way, particularly because a lot of the groups that we see have several different factions, right? So it's like not just the Ghost Bloods, but there's a bunch of different groups of Ghost Bloods who are maybe having different actions and different intents in different places. So at this point, I don't think we can say that like all of the Ghost Bloods are villains or all of the Sleepless are villains.
I think it's very clearly not. I mean, Nickley is definitely not a villain, right? I mean, he may or may not have some hidden motivations, but he's a friend. We have many Ghost Bloods that we sympathize heavily with.
And heavenly ones that we sympathize with.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one from the audience submitted, and this is for each panelist. It's a one-word answer. Team Hoyd or Team Kelsier?
Hoyd.
Hoyd.
Neither.
I guess that is technically one word. So
I like it.
Okay, question from the audience. Anyone on this side have a quick question? Okay, we got one over here. Give me a second. Super speed.
How dare you put Rathan on this as a villain and leave Deloff off?
Okay, that's valid.
He's actually the driving force behind this.
Yeah, I agree.
Totally.
Dealing with the
Technically,
stupid
we are
society
animals.
that was pushing him.
Mm-hmm.
Or is
That's
it
the entire issue here. And Rathan finally wakes up to that their society is an issue, and he turns back from it. And even further back, he went to the Dakhor Monastery, and he turned away from it initially. He knew, and then he stopped.
I think we're on the same page. I think
agree.
all of
I
us,
agree.
yeah,
Yeah,
are
100%.
like,
Honestly, I think we just missed it, and I'm sorry.
No, I'll be
No,
very fair. Like,
I did consider that, but I didn't say anything because I think it's very, very unambiguous that D-Lop is not hot.
There's your answer,
Yeah,
folks.
I think that part of that is just the fun of the game, but the complexity of what you're talking about is why I put him on the list. I wanted to see how people would rate this character that I agree with you is like not really a villain, maybe an adversary, as Seth pointed out.
the Cosmere is also a big place, and we have so many characters that we could not talk about or put in the poll.
Yeah. Jaden, what's another one?
Okay, we got one down here. I think you got to decide between the two of you who gets to ask the question now. Okay.
Fight to the death.
Okay, I've got a theory that I want to pick your brains about. So we've talked about how the Scadrians in the future of the Cosmere seem very antagonistic towards pretty much everybody else. And I wanted to ask about what your opinion is on this being kind of a manifestation of Sazed and trying to reconcile both ruin and preservation by preserving Scadrial at the expense of ruining other things.
Do any of you want to take that one?
I missed the very first part about that.
The Scadrians in sort of the space age are, we see them being adversarial to a lot of different groups. Do we think that that's a reflection of what's happening with the Shard?
I think that's just a hard yes. Yeah. I don't have too much more to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's more speculative because it is far future, but I would also agree that Harmony is devoted, strongly connected, and has the intent of preserving Scadrial. If that means other people have to die, other worlds have to suffer, Ruin might be okay with that, which then makes all of his actions
I really
justified.
like that take, actually, yeah, because Ruin and Preservation, that's the only world that we have really dived into,
right,
that was created by said Shard. And so he could balance the two by saying, okay, Preservation, you get to preserve here, Ruin, you get to
go there.
All that.
Go Ruin over there.
Right, yeah. And it's because he's the mortal secondary to that Shard combo, it's less up to him. I think the Shards would influence him that way. He didn't have thousands of years to direct them to that path.
This is 4-minute warning before we got to clear out.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. So, Jaden.
I have one more from the group, and then we'll go around again. But we've talked a lot about villain redemption, but not a lot about heroes falling.
Ooh.
Is there a prediction or something some sort of hint you can give us related to that?
I wish we didn't have 3.5 minutes left.
I know.
How about
That's
this?
a
Come to
whole
our
panel
panel
on its
next
own, to
year,
be honest.
and we will
That's
help
an
you out
entire
there.
bit.
How about one more, Jaden, and then we'll say our farewells.
Okay, one more question. So whoever, eeny, meeny, miny.
Let's
right
get
in the
someone
middle.
from this group up
Yeah,
here that's
can we
been so
get this
supportive.
row?
Yes.
Our singer, maybe?
The Robonial support squad.
Hi, thank you. I have a comment, thank you, a theory, and a question. I'll say them very fast. Thank you is for the Moash and Rabonial discussions. That was so much fun. You all have such interesting insights. That was so fun. The theory is you brought up, what if someone who was perhaps more altruistic took up both odium and honor, and you discussed various alternate combinations. I'd like to propose loyalty.
Loyalty. So we're combining the pure hatred of God with the...
It's not hatred.
You're right, it
it's
is
emotion.
passion. Well,
It's passion.
yeah, it depends on how we interpret, because odium
Passion is a
means
lie.
hatred. So Brandon has said that passion is more of how Ray's wanted to interpret it. But he
Not
took
the
the name
actual
odium,
intent.
which means hatred. So it is, yeah, there is interpretation. So we're talking passion, maybe hatred, and then the desires to uphold oaths. I can see loyalty.
So that my
I really like
question. Oh, thank you.
I can see it.
My question is extremely likely for someone in L cosplay to ask. L is set up in maybe 20 lines total across basically the epilogue of Rhythm of War and then Wind and Truth, but set up with a lot of what I can only describe as style. And given that he's actually done basically nothing except fail at the one job he was asked to do, what do you think's going on with that very enigmatic setup? Is that a villain setup, or is that a setup for something more complex?
I'm stoked for Elle to be a character similar to Rabaniel, who's super complex, who has some really compelling reasons for what he does, and maybe takes some actions that are questionable. I think at this point we don't have enough information about him to really say a lot, but I'm very excited to see more of him in the back half of the Stormlight Archive.
Yeah, I think that that seed that we got in the end of book 4 made us primed to we're gonna get a lot of great L stuff in book 5, and then it was kind of scratching the surface there. But yeah, I'm so excited to see more about L in the back half.
Yeah, I think that the leaders of the Fused are compared often to the Heralds, and so as we're expecting the Heralds to be main characters or be more prominent in the second half, I hope that will also be seen with the Fused. And so I think that while the way that Brandon described Cultivation's role as she and all of the shards are part of the problem, not the solution, I think maybe the same can be said about the Heralds and the Fused. At this point, they are problematic, and they might not be the solution, and then maybe someone like Kaladin is breaking that trend. But I believe that is all the time. So thank you for those questions.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming.
Just a couple of quick questions from our villain panel. There was a fun game of who is hot, who is evil, and for the results to that, make sure to check out the links in the show notes. But let's go over to Andrew, who has a question about Wind and Truth. Could you just tell me your first name, and then if there was anybody specific that you wanted the question directed to, I'll share it with them later.
Okay. My name is Andrew. I don't have anyone specifically to address this to, but so one thing I noticed is kind of a Chekhov's gun that happened in Book 5 and Wind and Truth, where they talk about how there is a vessel that is more appropriate for odium, and that the power will leave Taravangian for it. And it's highly implied, I believe it might even be stated outright, that it is Mishram, specifically Ba'edo Mishram. My question is, so Honor has already been set up as a independent entity that is beginning to gain more intelligence and sapience. Is that then being an entity that is going to be essentially a being born of the power that is more worthy of receiving the rest of the shards than anything else. Because it's highly implied with the whole Chekhov's gun thing, which Sanderson seems to respect in most of his writing, that is going to be the case. Mishram will at some point probably take up the power of odium, and honor will become an independent thing. Does honor become more worthy of the other things because it was born specifically of the shards?
This is a really interesting thought. Could honor, the sentient honor, perhaps gather more of the shards? Is that being the most worthy vessel to perhaps reforge Adonalsium? What do you think?
I think the recent example of the unoathed with Nodum is actually kind of in line with this. Nodum is a sentient spren. Nodum, he forms a relationship with the shard plate spren and the shard blade spren, and then he himself is a spren, which creates this brand new thing that we've never seen before. And if that's possible, if a spren can have enough relationships to be a member of the unoathed, I think that there is like good potential that a shard power could be a potential vessel of itself.
I think that there is danger in like what happens in between the shard being one shard and the shard being Adonalsium.
Yes.
Because the combinations of shards can be quite dangerous. And if there is not a mortal being, I just think we hear from, I believe it's the wind, that shards without vessels are very dangerous and something to be feared. And so the idea of then a somewhat sentient shard accumulating power is even more scary.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good call because I feel like they are less mature than the potential vessels that are operating because they're so split. And we've talked about this in the Stormlight Archive theorizing episode as well. But the path to becoming a combined Adonalsium, super shard is fraught with a lot of other
Right.
things that are all going, and there's no balancing or like centering aspect. There's only, in this instance, an example, the power of honor. And so
Yeah.
like, how is the power of honor going to combine with the power of ruin?
Right. And like, can you imagine? We already saw the struggle that Tanavast had in preventing the power of honor from simply attacking Odium
Mhm.
and destroying Rishar. If there's no vessel, there's nothing to stop the shards from simply following their intent to the farthest extent possible.
Which we also know that type of resistance comes in the form of Rasa to Odium. Odium wants more.
Right. Yeah.
Rasa holds it back.
Yeah.
We know that Ati holds back or directs ruin and its power. And so like we are just really shown several examples where the powers themselves, especially a singular power, is maybe not fit to like govern or responsibly grow and develop into a higher being of Adonalsium. Now, if there was a force like question Noadon that was trying to slowly bring shards together in a unite them fashion, but they weren't necessarily doing that by holding up one power of honor and being like, you will rise to the top. It would instead be like,
Yeah.
all the shard powers need to eventually get to a point where they can merge back together into one. That's just,
Aw.
fun bit of speculation.
Noadon's shard daycare.
Exactly. He's just got to get all the little babies together and then they will be friends.
Okay, let's go to this next question from John.
Your name? John and no. So my question has to do with ruin and preservation. My thoughts are that in Era 4 for Mistborn, that Elendel Basin becomes the focus of preservation, while the Malwish are the focus of ruin as a way of balancing that. Neither the Malwish are fleeing because ruin is trying to destroy them, and that's why they're so aggressively colonizing other places, or they're the sword of ruin to ruin the rest of the Cosmere. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love a far future theory about Era 4. The focus of preservation being like the Elendel Basin, Malwish being the focus of ruin, and a way to balance that. What do you think?
I think this is similar to something we speculated about at the end of another one of our panels,
Mhm.
that perhaps there is a realization by Sazed as the vessel of harmony, who's having so much trouble, as we see. He might realize that instead of completely suppressing the discord aspects of his power, that there may need to be kind of a steam valve. The discord has to happen,
Mhm.
but he can kind of direct where that discord is happening. And so he can focus the harmony side of his shard coin onto Scadrial and focus the discord side of the coin away from Scadrial, essentially letting the discord happen as the Malwish, as the Scadrians in general, leave the planet and go out into the greater Cosmere.
Yeah, John did also ask about like this concept of the sword of ruin. And I do think that ruin and preservation are gone. Like there is
Yeah.
only
Well,
harmony and discord until there's enough force applied to split them back down to like ATM and Laracium.
I
But
think it's both. I think it's yes and. I think that harmony exists and also preservation and ruin exist, which is why harmony is having so much trouble, because it's not completely dissolved together. It's
yeah.
like welded,
Mhm.
but it's not an alloy.
Got you. Yeah, yeah. Pressed together, but not the same thing, not one thing. Yeah, I am curious to see if we will have more examples of ruin on display or discord on display. Like I feel
Because
like
I think we're going to see with retribution
Mhm.
that even though it is retribution, there's going to be this tension, particularly with one half of that shard, the honor half.
Right.
So that's another reason why I say I think, yeah, we're going to continue to see the two shards that make up the combined shard exist. Now, could something like a ruin shard still be acting independently and have like just a sort of ruin? I'm not sure I totally buy that.
I would buy it in the case of retribution, a split that still exists between odium and honor, the power of odium and honor. And then I buy it less when it comes to harmony because of the amount of time. The more time that goes
Yeah,
by,
sure.
the less I see them as divisible. Whereas like in the immediate aftermath, and what do we have? 10, 50 years tops. Zaze has had hundreds of years.
Yeah, but
And
he seems to be having more trouble as time goes on.
that's very true. And there's also the concept of like the power of preservation of ruin had 10,000 years to develop. And so Zazed is nothing
Yeah.
compared to the power of preservation
Right.
and ruin.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I might have talked myself out of my own disagreement, but that's fun. So I appreciate John for asking this question.
That's all we have for the villains panel. Thank you for being here for this podcast. Thanks to everybody who came to the panel at Dragonsteel Nexus 2025. It was a super fun time. Do check out the links and check out the results from the fun little game that we played. And until next time, life before death,
Strength before weakness.
journey before destination.